Just going to let the panelists kind of introduce themselves as I take the first questions to each of them. But before we dive into the specifics of the battery landscape as it sits from a India perspective and how things line up, with the specific models that are there across mobility, stationary applications, different types of batteries and models that are there in these different spaces, I thought it would be great to start off with Mr. Chinchorkar first, to give us a view, since he's also not just heading up CES, but also with IESA and has a very nuanced view on how the Indian ecosystem from an energy storage space is played out. If you can lay out a kind of high-level landscape of how the ecosystem in India has really been evolving, I think that would be really great to kick us off.
Good evening everyone. Myself Chandrasekhar Chinchorkar, Director Corporate Advisory, looking after startup innovation, investment advisory and sustainability services at CES and ISA. So, the roadmap to renewables, has been made very clear by the government. So when we talk about, say, from 120 or 150, gigawatt or 170 gigawatt or total capacity, currently going up to say 500 or 550. Major portion of that is actually going to come from solar. And when you talk about solar, you have around 8, 9, 10 hours of solar power available, and the intensities vary. There are issues in terms of clouds. There are issues in terms of outputs. The CO is actually increasing on a daily basis. Technology improvements are happening, but ultimately when you talk about almost 15 hours of power being sourced through stored energy, it is something which is going to be a very challenging scenario. Maybe the power requirement is little lower on the post evening time when it is post 11 p.m. But the emerging scenario is that when we talk about 500 gigawatt, what kind of support is required, what kind of grid support is required, what kind of ancillary support is required, what is the funding that is the government is actually going to give. There's a policy which was laid out in August which talks about 40% VGF. They talk about 1.5 to 1 crore on a per megawatt basis support from the government. The way it has evolved is that important parameter is that because we don't have any manufacturing setup here in India, the supply chain needs to get developed. When ACC PLI was first floated, the entire thought process of getting the incentives done took almost 4 years for to push through. And as you are aware, ISA and CES has played a significant role in terms of pushing that policy document through. The value addition in the first 2 years, the value addition at the end of 5th year is something that is going to obviously create challenges because we don't have anything here. I am working on few transactions which basically talk about how the supply chain in terms of investment advisory and fundraise actually can happen. I'm involved with some companies who are on the battery swapping side, software side. So, it's been a very challenging scenario, and obviously value addition, the entire ecosystem coming to India is going to be very, very challenging. But the opportunity is pretty large, and we need to really push for it. So, broadly, if you look at the way things are emerging in the US, why I'm giving this comparative parallel example is that US has given incentives of something like $380, $390 billion. We look at India where entire PLI scheme incentive would be say 1 lakh crore. In totality, out of which batteries, cell manufacturing is 18,000 crores. So looking at the population of US, which is say 1/4 of India, the number of vehicles probably more or less the same, but US has 80%, passenger cars, India has 80% two-wheelers. So 2.5, 3 kilowatt hour battery as compared to a 40 kilowatt hour battery. So the requirement here, in terms of population is going to be humongous. The requirement for even people moving to say intercity hydrogen transportation is also going to be higher because hydrogen cannot run without a battery support. If a normal bus has to have a 300 kilowatt hour battery, a bus, hydrogen truck will at least have a 80 to 100 kilowatt hour battery. So the requirement is going to be humongous. If we just talk about truck, 10% of the truck going hydrogen way, the requirement for battery is going to be 100 gigawatt hour. So the opportunity is immense, huge, and that is where I think things should actually improve. We are pushing for additional PLI in cell manufacturing. We are also pushing for FAME 3 getting applied to private buses in India because till date only battery ecosystem or FAME 1 and FAME 2 has been given to state run or central run buses only. So that otherwise the ecosystem will not emerge. That's something which is very important. So we need to push for all this, and that is an emerging scenario. The opportunity is humongous. We need to really push for more funding from the government in terms of incentives, and I think that is where things will actually help, in terms of getting into the system the right way and pushing for more penetration. So that's my initial thoughts.
Thanks for that, sir. And I think you're right. The opportunity is it sits of how batteries are uniquely positioned, that irrespective of what fuel source we look at, what the evolution is from the type of renewable, this is a necessary evolution that we will have from a mobility side for what the vehicles will need to go through, but also on how ready our own kind of internal grid stationary players will need to be. Before we kind of get into the specifics of those models though, Dave, since you have this unique view from C4P's perspective as well, would love to just, if you can give us a landscape of how over the last decade or so, from a C4P perspective, you guys have seen the energy transition, specifically in the context of batteries, play out from a global level. Would be great if you could set that up, and also actually just talk us through, because I think for most of the group, we're used to GPs really coming in from an investment background. Having a CVC actually represented on the panel is an interesting mix as well. So if you could give the perspective of C4B as a CVC and what you're looking at as opportunities, why you look at India, would be great to get that as the other perspective from you.
That's a long question, but let me try to attempt it in one go. So hi everyone, and thanks for having me here. I am Dev, work for C4B, heading C4B Ventures, which is a fund to be set up focusing on energy storage value chain in India. But before I go into that, for those of you who are not aware of C4B, it's a lithium-ion cell technology player from the US. We have our own technology stack across proprietary battery chemistry, focusing on phosphate-based batteries for now. Something similar to LFMP. We primarily license our technologies to operating partners and enable gigafactories internationally. So when I say license our technology stack, it primarily includes battery chemistry, manufacturing know-how, quality standards, cell designs, plant layouts of course, and eventually, and most importantly, a qualified supply chain. Everything which goes inside a gigafactory, be it raw materials, equipments, engineering services, everything is sort of qualified by us. So in the US, we have our own gigafactory, which is one of the largest homegrown gigafactory after Tesla Panasonic, known as IM3NY, Imperium 3 in New York. We have cumulatively, as of today, we are at about 1 gigawatt, not a very large scale, of course, but having said this, one of the largest homegrown gigafactories in today's context. And now we are coming up with a venture capital fund in India, C4B Ventures, which will be focusing on the entire value chain of batteries, right from upstream Indian opportunities doing recycling extraction technologies to midstream companies doing innovations on alternate chemistries, cell components, innovation on the manufacturing process, which could include making the process simpler or reducing the energy consumption and so on and so forth. And then we'll be investing into downstream companies doing battery packs, BMSs, thermal management, possibly battery analytics, along with certain adjacent areas around Industry 4.0, EV infra, maybe the end use case of batteries including drones, eVTOLs and so on and so forth. So these would be the investable themes for us. We'll be investing into early stage companies, I would say seed or pre-series A. We are doing this, the way we are different vis-a-vis other incumbent funds is possibly, I would say, we being an operator ourselves. When we evaluate early stage companies, especially in this deep tech space, I think technology diligence becomes very, very important. And we being an operator ourselves, I think technology diligence is something which is very strong. I think in our case, because when we engage with a founder, let's say a founder is doing something on silicon anodes or innovation on recycling, so we can actually validate that to quite an extent by probably making our own cells, using those materials, testing those materials onto our labs, having our own in-house experts across the battery value chain. So those are the kind of things which we can do on the diligence side, and more importantly, how do we add value to the founders once we do those deals will be areas of technology commercialization, because we work with 300 plus battery companies internationally across the value chain of storage, and a lot of these innovations, Indian innovations, when they are looking for the right licensing arrangements, right investment opportunities internationally within the battery space, those are the kind of alliances in the network which we bring onto the table for our founder fraternity. IP protection, again, in this deep tech space, IP protection is something which is very, very important to a lot of these founders, and this is a journey which we have covered in the last 10 years ourselves. So a lot of feedback and a lot of guidance to give to those founders in that context, and eventually supporting them on providing a potential market access into our own network of gigafactories. So in the US, we have our own gigafactory. We are expanding internationally into Australia, UK, a few other countries. We are on a goal to have 10 gigafactories all in a JV format by 2030. So objective is to give a potential market access to all of our portfolio companies into the gigafactories of C4V's own network. And lastly, we are doing this fund in a JV format with a very credible homegrown Indian fund, VC fund, wherein they bring in the expertise of on the investment side and on the traditional VC expertise of fund operations, hiring, and so on and so forth, helping our portfolio companies raise next round of funding, and we support them on the technology front. So this is where, so in terms of timeline, we should be operational in the next 6 months. We are in the midst of setting up our fund. This is on the fund side. And Shiva, to your other question on the macro landscape of batteries in the last few years, I think it's a very, very dynamic space and things are evolving as we speak. And I mean, I can talk about the manufacturing capacities, how they have changed over the years, which regions are coming up, geopolitics, of course, super important, technology front, and lastly, the pricing volatility. Let me possibly go one by one. So on the manufacturing front, if I go 5 years back, I think by 2018 we were internationally about 200 gigawatt hours, and in this year we should be clocking 1 terawatt hours, which means we internationally have grown 5x in the last 5 years, and industry should further grow at least 5x in the next 7-8 years, so 5 terawatt hours, and most of this growth will be coming in China, of course, followed by US or rather North America plus Europe. US currently is about 60 gigawatt hours, 60-70 gigawatt hours, which could actually grow 15x from here in the next 7-8 years, given the IRA incentives which have come out in August of 2022. So we are expecting out of the total 5 terawatt hour capacity by 2030, US alone should be 1 terawatt plus, 1 terawatt hour plus. Europe again should be a similar capacity. China about 2.5 terawatt hour plus, and balance should be the rest of the world including India. So this is on the capacity front. Geopolitics, I think every country is trying to maximize whatever resources they have, which is sort of creating troubles in some sense. Indonesia, for instance, banned export of nickel a year back, raw nickel. Chile nationalizing its lithium. One of the largest reserves of lithium is what they have, and them nationalizing it could create some potential impacts going forward. Time will tell, but I mean, things are evolving as we speak. China, I think a few weeks back, is looking to tighten export regulations when it comes to exporting graphite. And graphite, as of today, is used in every battery, every lithium-ion battery on the negative electrode side. And 90% of refining for graphite happens in China. So if those exports don't happen, eventually raw material feed for batteries which are to be manufactured in North America or Europe can go for a toss. So all of this, how it plays out, time will tell. But again, geopolitics is playing very, very important role in this industry. On the technology front, I think again significant innovations are happening. Earlier until about 2020, it was all about nickel-based cathodes. We evolved from NMC 111, which is 33% each for nickel, manganese, cobalt, to I think 532, eventually 622, now moving towards 811, which means 80% nickel and 10% each of manganese and cobalt. But 2020 onwards, industry has transitioned more towards LFP batteries, phosphate-based, iron-based batteries. So LFP is clearly a winner when it comes to growth in the last 3 years, and the trend seems to be continuing going forward. However, incremental innovations are happening. LFPs, most of the LFP cathode makers internationally are trying to transition towards LFMP, which means doping in of manganese in those cathodes to enhance the energy density by a further 10%, which would entail a lower lithium requirement for these LFMP cathodes, which in turn would mean lower pricing per kilowatt hour. So LFMP is a transition happening on the cathode side, then sodium ion is again a transition happening on the cathode side, which is primarily for stationary markets. Then on the anode side, I think silicon doping is the next thing. Right now we have all graphite based anodes. Silicon up to 10% is already happening in certain markets, but goal is to have higher doping of silicon in those on the anode side, which is clearly happening as we speak. Then on the anode side, of course, lithium metal anodes are also next on the cards, which is primarily for solid state batteries. Again, innovations are happening on, I would say, manufacturing process itself, which could entail things like dry electrodes coating, which can reduce significantly capex, space requirements, opex. All of these reductions are potentially happening as Tesla and some other startups, Tesla and a lot of other startups, actually smaller companies, are trying to achieve this, commercialize this technology. And lastly, I would say on the pricing front, a lot of volatility in lithium in the last few years, at least 2020 onwards. 2020 we were seeing lithium at about $7 per kg internationally on the spot markets. Last year it shot up to $75 per kg, which is 10x, 12x of what it was in 2020. And this year we have significantly come down to from 70 something dollars per kg last year to $25 per kg this year. Even though these are volatile numbers from spot markets, and eventually most of the market works on contracts which are long term in nature, but then contracts typically follow the direction of spot. So this market definitely has been very, very volatile last 3 years. And lithium in particular is a oligopolistic industry, which means 4-5 major players typically controlling the global markets, and in particular Albemarle and SQM sort of players from South America are actually commanding close to 50% market share internationally. And if you look at the recent earning reports of Albemarle, for instance, they are intending to stop all of their fixed price contracts, which means they are betting on lithium prices going up in the near term, which is why they are focusing on variable price contracts, which is a U-turn from what they were doing earlier. I think these are the kind of, I think this hopefully gives a macro perspective.
No, absolutely. I think that's great. They get the compounding points I think from you that are leading to this. So I think if I link it what you have flagged off and what Chandra had flagged off earlier as well, what we're seeing is this market that very clearly we as an ecosystem need to move towards. There has to be this electrification, because with all of this move of how mobility will come through, irrespective of what the source of power is for generation, it needs to be there on the stationary side. There's these operational challenges that are leading to optimization inside lithium, but also figuring out if there are other use cases coming in, which are affecting different segments of the market. But now you're moving from, I think, so what someone had mentioned earlier, this being a lithium-focused solution that we've been living in a lithium battery world, to really being a broader ecosystem that's now moving into several different pockets themselves. Sandeep, just wanted to get your thoughts as well, because you guys as Green Frontier have invested fairly heavily in different elements of the mobility chain. Some of these are trends that are probably common to mobility, but if you can just give the view from what your experience has been on how mobility has been evolving in India and what you see as the future now, because I think we set the context and a little bit of the view from what Dave and Chandra mentioned of the market going forward, but if you could say what you've learned from the opportunity inside mobility and where you see it going forward as the battery opportunity there.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just provide a quick background about ourselves. We're Green Frontier Capital, early stage investor in the green energy transition opportunity in India. Mobility is a large part of our portfolio, and we believe that the mobility opportunity in India, especially as it relates to the EV ecosystem, is a multifaceted opportunity, which aligns with our thesis of investing in a business opportunity that represents a balance between sustainability and short-term as well as medium-term growth. And for us, the EV ecosystem opportunity is not an issue of if, but it's an issue of when. And that is not being driven, it's actually an inevitability, but it's not being driven by vehicular change preferences, but is also kind of drawing on the tailwinds of multiple things that are happening in India. Obviously, one is the fundamental change in energy systems. The second, of course, being the fact that urban infrastructure is developing. And third, of course, technology use has also evolved over time. And we want to be at the forefront of all of these opportunities as they evolve. As a result of which, we've actually invested in the entire ecosystem, whether it's manufacturing of two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, whether it's actually investing in charging infrastructure opportunities, whether it's investing in the financing of EV vehicles, thereby representing our view that the entire EV ecosystem requires an integrated approach. And we are really encouraged by the breakthrough innovation that we're seeing in things like battery chemistry and battery storage. We're also really encouraged by the fundamental new business models that are actually emerging related to mobility as a service, We're also very, very encouraged by other such, opportunities in the EV ecosystem, which are actually, spurring growth opportunities across the system. So as a result of which, going forward, our learnings have been that by actually providing an investment in the multifaceted EV ecosystem, our learnings enable synergies to happen. And when those synergies effectively happen, we actually prevent these companies that we're actually investing in, which are early stage, from facing problems very early on, and create a more sort of a longer term opportunity for them. Battery storage, battery chemistry, as far as India is concerned, we were having a chat outside. The fundamental technologies are not going to get created in India. The fundamental technologies will originate out of the global north. What you'll find in terms of innovation in the EV ecosystem as it relates to battery chemistry and battery storage technology is going to be innovation on the affordability side. So it's price-led innovation that's going to happen, and then of course within that price-led innovation there'll be material changes that will be played around with, and so on and so forth. I'd like to kind of just bring up one point here to address the issue of why innovation is not happening in India at the same pace as what we're actually seeing in the West. And that has largely to do with two things. One is, of course, the inability of providers of capital to provide long-term capital, which is typically the hallmark of deep technology. So unless we actually have long-term financing options, deep technology innovation is always going to be a big issue, especially when you're running venture kind of capital funding, because we've got finite life periods within which we have to deliver returns and DPIs, and these technologies actually only start showing success parameters, 7-8 years down the road, by which time it's time for us to kind of return capital back to investors. But more importantly, also there's a lot of fear of failure, and early stage companies that are founded by young dynamic entrepreneurs, they are actually more inclined to take safer bets in terms of innovation, because if they fail doing what they do, capital access becomes very difficult. So we're actually going after the moonshot ideas in India and the EV ecosystem, which no one is willing to fund, which is also the hallmark of why you're actually finding a lot of development taking place in the West, because failure is actually celebrated in the West. So you look at a startup who's actually engaged in battery chemistry or battery technology development, they've failed, and therefore they come back to you and you ask them what are your learnings from that failure, and you're encouraged by the fact that they've failed and they've learned, and therefore they're actually on a path to deliver greater success on their second round of capital raising. But in India, I just think the system is actually set up to frown on failure. So in order to kind of have significant amount of innovative technologies and capital chasing those innovative technologies, you have to have investors who are willing to commit capital long term, not be worried about backing entrepreneurs who are creating absolutely disruptive innovative technology and creating a multifaceted portfolio like what we've done. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, I think that's great, Sandeep. So I have a few more questions on mobility, but since you set us up with the note on battery tech, I will first pass to Priya. I have a few thoughts on that as well, but I will let as an investor who's also deployed in the space go.
Thanks, Shivan, and thanks to IIC for having us here. Just another quick background on us. We're an early stage climate tech fund. We invest at the seed stage, pre-seed and pre-series A, into companies that are solving for decarbonization. So yes, I mean, I think the title of this talk is, or this panel discussion is basically battery energy storage. And I think Dave, we pointed out some really interesting trends overall in the market landscape around the value chain for batteries, from recycling to manufacturing to material sourcing, and then finally energy storage. And perhaps I can focus on some of the investments that we've made in energy storage, because we've also made a lot of investments in the grid. And the grid has traditionally not been a very venture capital friendly kind of, I would say, area, mainly because it's sort of been fairly regulated as sort of an asset. But what we've done is we've looked at companies that are essentially investing in decentralized energy storage, where we think is really the future. So where in the past we've had coal-fired grid supported by diesel gensets, supported by kind of centralized energy backup generators. What we see a movement towards is basically hydro storage, clean energy storage in the formulation of batteries, and then also in the future potentially flywheels, supercapacitors, green hydrogen, etc. So there's a huge movement towards that. If we want to have a stabilized, resilient grid infrastructure, which I think we're aiming towards, that the country is fully electrified, but unfortunately intermittent electricity is what most areas are getting outside of the sort of core tier 1, tier 2 cities. And as we move towards integrating more renewables into the grid, moving towards 500 gigawatts by 2030, I think the idea is to make sure that we have enough batteries, as an example of clean energy storage, manufactured indigenously or recycled potentially indigenously, and plugging into these areas of the grid that are suffering from this intermittence. So where we see a lot of opportunities, essentially, these sort of systems which can eventually talk to or sort of have a language with grid operators. And one of our companies is actually doing just that. They've got an aggregate sort of, a system of batteries that are essentially plugging into the grid, and then they have software and analytics on top of that, which essentially can tell what the voltage and frequency regulation is across various points in the grid, and where there's off-peak and on-peak hours, and different areas where it needs to be sort of strengthened. And that we feel is really the future. These sort of idea of virtual power plants, virtual energy storage is something quite nascent right now, but we see, as we're benchmarking to companies in the US and Europe, that's where we're sort of, that's where the focus really should be. And on the other hand, I would also say that indigenous, battery materials is actually another area of interest. So, for example, 70% of the components that go into batteries actually get imported from outside India. So it would be great actually to see more companies looking at open mining, looking at extraction of rare earth materials, and being able to plug these back into the supply chain over and over again, have battery manufacturers kind of source, locally. And that's where we see a lot of potential. I think another area is sort of smart grid infrastructure, so where grid companies can actually rely on smart meters, which is now becoming mandatory across different states. But having those smart meters, again, creating a sort of virtual system of communication between smart meters, EV batteries, solar rooftops, and the entire infrastructure around it, so that you have consumers who can then trade electricity with producers. And that's, I think, also futuristic, but looking at it from a sort of system which is also, to your point, and the venture investable, and something that can look at potentially gaining sort of those kinds of financial returns within a particular gestation period, which is what most sort of venture funds in early stage to mid-stage growth capital looks at. That's something that could essentially be monetized in that way. So just those are a few comments, headline comments about the venture opportunity within energy storage.
So just quick reverse, since you brought up the battery chemistry, we have a founder that's actually working on this space here as well. So Mahesh, before I pass the mic officially to you, just some quick notes. I think as reverts from slight differences between where Sandeep and I sit. Would love to get your view on this as well. So I think the fundamentals of saying this is an area where innovation could be done in the battery space, or we can try something which is a thematically completely new chemistry, is something that maybe is for a market where that capitalization and the early capital would come earlier. In the US, where there is that grant capital as well, even before the VCs really come in, where this space itself, you typically find startups with $4-5 million in grants that have gone through. We'd probably be a market where we can say, here is a solution that conceptually does work, and we actually prove it. I think a little bit of what you've said, Sandeep, on the mindset for the founders of the failure may be at least evolving from the software startups that have been through this failure as acceptable and seen as a strength, may evolve into the segment of the market, but it hasn't fully rolled into the same extent in the deep tech ecosystem. So when you start looking at the subset of deep tech startups gone through the journey and are willing to still say we're trying this innovation which is high risk and high reward rather than just an incremental improvement. It is a much smaller subsegment of the overall market. But Mahesh, you are living this, breathing this every day and working on a very innovative solution as well. So it would be great if you could just introduce what Kodi Energy is and how you see the landscape of being able to build an innovative battery startup out of India as well.
So, good evening everybody, and thank you for giving this opportunity. And my name is Mahesh, and founder of Kodi India. So, I will tell a story. Like I spent close to 18 years in US, worked at the finest of the companies like Apple and PayPal before acquiring by eBay. So, I live in and built the deep tech. So, the fundamental reason I came back to India is to build the technology from the ground up. So that is my thesis. So I choose energy sector because like food security and energy security is really important for the country. When we want to build the technology from the ground up, we need to have very seasoned people, right? So there is a fundamental miss in India. So, and also the investor ecosystem is not understanding the deep tech. And the likes of IFCs, the likes of big people have spoken, and they said we don't have people to understand what you're talking. So the fundamental reason in India is people talk but they don't walk. So I'll give some realities in the technologies. Coming to our company, we are a very deep tech, working on the very deep in the material side and also reducing the cost of the manufacturing. That's where the people are going to make money, right? So if you talk about the material side, India has enough raw materials of lithium. We have hard rock available in the northern part and southern part as well. It's a matter of time, another 5 years. The lithium extraction and usage is going to happen in India, and we are self-reliant in that way. The second thing is we also signed the free trade agreement with Australia, and Australia do a lot of rock-based processing. So we are going to get a lot of technology rather than the triangle of Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina is burned. It's like salt. It's a different extraction process. In days back, the extraction process used to take almost close to months to get the purity level. Now it's came down to weeks. So the technology and the process is improving a lot. And also, currently in India we are working with 25 different raw material suppliers. The biggest, the smallest, and the medium companies. So the lot of interest of materials going to come and going to manufacture in India, because India is the second largest automotive manufacturer, and we are the one of the largest renewable. So far installation capacity 180 gigawatt hour of renewable. So that's going to come in. And let's talk about chemistries. We talk about LFP, NMC and everything. So LFP is a China game. It's a China monopoly thing, and it involves a lot of China assets, right? So people won't understand when they talk about LFP is, okay, what the China tells, what we can import cheaply from China, the mainstream people will talk in India. But the reality is, fundamental thing is, LFP is a very low recycling thing compared to the NMC. So, and the BOM requirement and the cost, because the volume game with the China, LFP is a better pricing, but not in the NMC side. NMC have all the advantages of the long life self, the range, and also you can get, you can use less number of cells in the vehicle and all. And but people will talk about LFP, but the reality is China propaganda, nothing else. So, but we work with global suppliers, like the largest cathode manufacturers in the world, like BASF and Umicore Retain. They're the world largest. They work in tons of the tonnage of requirements. So they told us clearly, this is the noise for another 5 years. But coming to the manganese, it's not yet proven it, not at the customer hand. LMFP, right? You talk about LMFP, but you did not see that LMFP in any kind of hand of the product. Still, a lot of things need to be coming in. So, and let's talk about what Sandeep is telling. Like a lot of innovations are happening in the north. But coming to our thing, so we are working on a sodium ion materials technology. We manufacturing our own cathodes, anodes, and electrolyte in-house. So this is one of the finest in the world. So they are going to do a major announcement in 2 months. Coming to the manufacturing, right, where there are a lot of savings are there. People don't understand that to manufacture 1 kilowatt hour, you require 52 kilowatt hour of energy. To manufacture 1 gigawatt hour, you require 50 gigawatt of energy. Where we are going to get this energy? How the Europeans are going to pay the premium of energy, right? So there is a lot of innovation to happen in the manufacturing. So we are working on the dry coating technology and the head of Tesla in terms of the room temperature based manufacturing. Currently the technology is benchmarking by one of the world's largest cell manufacturers in Korea. So that's what we are doing in India for the rest of the world. So in terms of materials, in terms of the manufacturing optimization, and also the other things is the fundamental problem. India is the policies, right? How policies works designed for a couple of people, couple of corporates in India. But especially in the cell, there is in the backward integration there are billions of dollars. The frontward integration billions of dollars. It's never going to be one person is going to do everything. It's an ecosystem. It needs to be developed, right? So the policy should be driven that is friendly to the small companies, to the big corporates. But that is unfortunate thing in India. So hopefully that will be taken care through ISA and other policy influences. So that one. And also, yeah. So coming again, Sandeep, 17 delegation people came to our office from Korea to understand our technology. So there are a lot of innovations are happening in India. So the reverse brain drain is going to come back to India because you see the opportunities, how India is getting the China plus one, and a lot of manufacturing is coming to India, and the high paid jobs are going to create a lot. That will mitigate a lot of the people are living out from India. And also the one fundamental issue I faced when interacting with the early stage investors to the pre-series, series A's. First thing is when we interact with them, they will tell us it's too early or too late, right? It's a common thing they end up sending us, but the reality is they don't understand what is early and late, right? What is early is late is late, so they miss the opportunity, right? So, and please look at the team, please look at the seasonality of the employees. Okay, that's where you can going to bet on them. It's not about how they have done in the past and what failures they have, what success they have, but look at how the team is building from the ground up, right? So, I mean, fundamental things we are missing when we are evaluating to put the money in the real deep tech startups. Look at the founders, look at the team they are bringing, look at their credibilities in the market, but don't come up with a too late, too early. There are enough opportunities are there in the battery. And coming back to the duration, right? One chemistry won't fit for this entire storage industry. There will be short-term, mid-term, and long-term storage. So there will be flow batteries will come. There will be flywheels will come. There will be a gravity-based energy will come. There will be the other kind of storages also will come. But predominantly in the stationary storage, the lithium. Then after the sodium will come. So, and but that will be 80% of the market. The rest 20% of the market will be on the other chemistries, other things. Because if you take the gravity base, it's a heavy capex, and return of investment is origin of 10 to 15 years. So does your LPs have that kind of patience? No, right? So these are the and the other area is if you touch all the chemistries, right? What is the most efficient round trip efficiency? Entire round trip efficiency need to be calculated when you put the money. Because one way we are telling about hydrogen, but round trip efficiency of hydrogen is not great. still we are pushing hydrogen for mobility, right? The entire Japanese failed on the fuel cells. You see, I was there in US, but we never drive any fuel cells, but you see electric cars. But because of the influence from the big boys, still the hydrogen noise is going on. But when they burn their hands, like Japanese, they realize the reality. But I'm speaking some hard truth. That's a facts, and the lithium and sodium and other chemistries is going to come, but along with the complementing with other technologies.
No, so I think that's interesting, Mahesh. I think it is a question of us saying these different chemistries and these different applications we talked about overlap, and you will see this. The division is not just on this market of saying mobility and stationary are two markets that are behaving differently inside each. There are these sub-use cases that will end towards certain things. When it comes to the investor feedback, I think it is, just to take one of their own lines, which we have also used at times, it is too early from this part of the market for investors to really understand. I think we're just in a coincidental room where 3 investors have actually looked at battery chemistry, but that is an anomaly. I think that might be 3 or probably 4 in the industry that stands on the country today. I don't think there's too many more of that, so I agree with you, there was an anomaly in how the room looks. But yeah, deep tech itself is probably something that enough investors are now starting to learn how to do the evaluation, but probably 4 or 5 years in, that hopefully will change and we will see an improvement in how that team can do. But you are really pioneering how that will play out for the industry. Since you brought up stationary use cases and what was going to play out there as well, though, just one thing we haven't touched upon, we've touched upon the mobility use case, some nuances of how that market's playing out and what are some of the fuels and the applications that can come through. Jen, you from Seekers have looked at a range of mobility, stationary use cases that's kind of outside what we've talked of, from saying grid applications and what will happen from central infrastructure that Priya kind of touched on as well. As you look at the opportunity, I think from Seekers' perspective, you have done this from home applications, a kind of range of other small micro-utilities as well, and looking at this from RE cases. So it would be great to understand from you how that market looks in India, and what you see as the opportunity for that to scale up as well.
Thanks, Shiva. And very fireworks oriented panel so far, because people are taking contrary positions. I would have expected you to sort of flame the fires. But let's go to Kamar. So, intro to Seekers. Seekers is a clean energy financier. We do that. So we come in at late stage. Typically, we like to come in once the TRL levels are completed. On paper, CRL levels are completed, and we focus on commercialization. So how people are commercializing business models, tech. We prefer proven tech, so that the TRL business will come to us. But we find that there is a lot of space left in how tech has to be used, what models have to be adapted, how value engineering has to be done. And sometimes we take a call on people who are still going through that transition journey. As cash flow backed investors, we've looked at rooftop solar, we've looked at rural energy access, industrial energy efficiency, we are funding thermal energy storage. We've been very active in electric vehicles. Of course, there's a lot of money going there. We have been doing electric vehicles and EVs across the value chain. We have done component manufacturers, OEMs, renters, lenders, asset owners, and all kinds of models. We are also doing direct retail lending in EVs right now for the cargo mobility space. Now, it is from that lens. I just want to step back from your question for a second. Sorry. And look at it. When we are looking at adoption of clean energy technologies in India, right, whether it was wind energy wave initially, then solar, electric vehicles, and now battery energy storage, right, there are 2 broad aspects. One aspect is where you have a government option demand created. Right? That the value of that is that there is a huge amount of volume which gets deployed, industry gets set up, expertise gets built out, but it's all oriented towards large utility, large tenders, large fleet, and it has got value. But it is half of the story, it's not 90% of the story. If you look at numbers, it looks like 90% of the story, it's only half of the story. The rest of the story is in the fact that all of the solutions in clean energy, including solutions with battery, are distributed demand or distributed application-based solutions. The moment you go to distributed demand, there is space for innovators, there is space for aggregators, there is space for financiers to fund distributed. Right? And that is where we need more people in this room as well as people outside the room paying attention. Because we are moving beyond, we moved off of wind for no reason. There is a lot of distributed energy opportunity in wind which we have moved off. It's on the back burner somewhere. Rooftop solar, we are deploying 1/5 of what we should do. So from Seeker's perspective, what we look at is what business models, what aggregation models make sense. And that's why we have been looking at static energy storage as an ITV for 4-5 years now. We've been putting term sheets out for thermal storage, and obviously we are putting out for static storage, including for batteries, including mainstream chemistries, etc. What I see and what gets me excited here is there are two pathways. Of course, you need policy to create markets like ancillary energy and stuff like that. But there are two things which get me excited. One, there is a lot of distributed application creation which both the rooftop solar and energy efficiency industries have created. So you will see the CNI industry starting to move, commercial and industrial, starting to apply batteries in their use cases as the battery prices keep falling and as more and more batteries get available and ecosystem capability gets built. Right? We've seen this trend in rooftop solar DC. We've seen this trend in energy efficiency to a lesser extent, but we hope to see that trend in a big way. The second big trend which gets us excited is you are deploying a large number of distributed batteries and charging infra in the Indian market because of mobility. Now, all of that capacity can create grid resilience, schedulable, can create storage if you have vehicle to grid, and can create the market for the tools and equipment for the analytics side or the hardware side, which allow these to be used more flexibly. At the end of the day, to me, the waste is not that we are moving slow. Waste is that if there is a battery going in, how fast can I take 1300 cycles out of it? And what can I do beyond the 1300 cycles? Right? If there is a battery going in, how much can I use solar surplus in a day and night, low load market conditions to charge that so that the grid is able to take in more of this. And the ROI or ROE for India goes up, or India as a country goes up, because you are able to merge what I think mentioned, huge amounts of solar coming in with flexible demand. So when we look at static energy, one thing which is pushed back from investing at scale is there are many things for which there is no market. Today, if a corporate puts in a static energy solution, they don't really have an incentive to do that. The time of pay or time of use doesn't exist. Time of pay is very small. Right? So that's one thing which is needed in the policy. The second is you need this ecosystem which implements this, which exists. A lot of people who are working in EV charging and solar can move to this ecosystem. And the third thing is how to innovatively use now battery assets which are already going into the corporates, parking bay, and households and factories. They are already going. And then look at beyond that what I need to buy to execute, to go ahead. Right? Because till this point is a green discount point. It's not a green premium market. Beyond this, you may have to go green. Then it's all blue. Not sure whether I answered that the way you wanted, but that's what.
Yeah, so I'm going to probably come back to you a little bit on the depth of what you guys have worked on in some stationary segments, but we're also cognizant of time, which is where we stand. So I want to take a couple more questions and then see if there's something from the audience. But just since you introduced the topic of saying this intersection and the opportunity for aggregators and other parts of the model to come up, that's in effect one of the components of the battery energy space that we didn't talk of either in the slide that was kind of or yet in this conversation, but I think it's one of these open-ended parts of the market that we should just lay out for the audience as well, that this is where right now the stationary and the mobility market have this as one of the main intersection points. You've seen applications and certain utilities coming in globally from saying here's how they're electric can start to play a role, here's how early signs of this being some of the other use cases that now makes what we talked of earlier as two fairly segmented markets of saying here's what mobility applications will be, charging bay applications will be versus stationary applications, either the grid or the home use will be. And the reality is, if we are trying to maximize this from an overall market potential perspective, it is about us saying, as a nation, we need to actually get all of these batteries to be optimized and go through as much of their life as humanly possible. And that involves somehow finding ways that these can now start to interact and provide support to each other. And that's an evolution that we probably have to go through from an overall perspective as well. One of the things I just wanted to set for broader context as well, though, Mahesh, since you are the one that's looked at interactions with DISCOMs, interactions with kind of a customer set, how have you seen that evolve? Is there willingness now from these larger DISCOMs or the potential buyers of the technology that you're working on is saying, now we know we have to look at more innovative solutions, we know this infrastructure we have to take, and we're looking at how the journey of this stationary investment, especially from large corporates, DISCOMs, others that are in the larger kind of stationary value chain. Would just be good if you can kind of lay that out as one of the other points, and then I just want to open it up in case there's questions from the audience before we go back to our own structured conversation.
So, see, whether it's a large DISCOMs or stationary installation, like any other country, India is a cost sensitive market. Like the price is the really important. So when I interact in a day-to-day basis with customers, along with my supply chain partners, one thing we always will talk about cost, right? So because if you see the solar side, 180 gigawatt are already installed, but they are not making money because tariff rates are $2, right? They are literally burning their hands. All the investors and like now you're adding a top of that stationary storage, whatever chemistry it might be, right? Again, it's a huge capital deployment, right? So how we to learn the lessons of the other countries have played is really well, right? So in that, the tariff rates, especially during the night time, who are generating from the renewables and storing it into the stationary storage, give a little bit more pricing. That's where the people are going to save the money. That's where they're going to protect the investors' interest in investing in that particular project. So these should be driven by the policy, right? So if policy is not in the place, nobody is going to make money, and nobody is going to protect the assets they are going to build. But irrespective of that, now the post-pandemic, the electric usage increased because of everybody is using smart tablets and everything for education. Now the layer of EV is coming, and you know what happened in California, one of the largest GDP compared to the India. So they asked to shut down the EV charging in the summer. So just imagine this is the kind of situation which India is going to face because they are an organized country. They are fine. They're, with one alert, they will be silent. But India, it's chaos. Okay, we are going to, the politics will play all this. But how do we mitigate the fundamental grid issues, right? So we are really good at expansion of the grid, but the grid can be protected with many ways, supercapacitors and other things are coming up, right? So the technology, the policy, and the usage, and the price. I mean, these are the things that really drive the market and attract the investors.
Sorry, Mahesh, just to clarify, from a buyer behavior, have you seen the willingness to invest, or there's still, because it's so price conscious, because they're not making enough, there's still resistance right now that you felt from a director?
See, if you have a right solution, they are really ready to invest. Because, but when I interact with the global investors to the Indian investors, I see the global traction is a lot.
Yeah, so slower than we are globally, but there's at least initial movement to say this is a...
So especially either they need to take an advice from the industry without a bias, and so that they learn, so they're putting their right money with the right company, right? So but there's good traction coming from India and also from the other markets as well as investments.
So slower, but we started to at least move in the right direction from that side. So just wanted to quickly check in case there's questions from the audience, please. Sure.
see, when we talk about energy storage system, the support that comes from say V2G or battery swapping, something which is very important to understand, because when we talk about say $300 per kilowatt hour as storage capex and some amount of VGF being given by the government, if we are able to say promote, for example, one of the studies that I have recently done is where can we look at say V2G from 1 lakh or 2 lakh buses which are actually used where time of the day, 2 hours in the afternoon, the battery is getting charged maybe at 4 rupees or 4.5 rupees or 5 rupees, and the power is being used in the evening from say 7 to 11 or 12. Typically in India, if 20% is the peak power requirement in the evening times broadly. So if those batteries which are used in say buses, why I am taking the example of buses, because buses can actually take 300 kilowatt hour battery, and you can have something like anything between 50 to 80% being used for V2G scenarios. If I am buying the power at 4 rupees in the afternoon, assuming that I am supposed to get a 14% ROE, because all MYT calculation, multi-year tariff calculations are done at 14 or 15% sort of an ROE, I can actually sell the power at back to the grid at 6. So typically, if you look at the example that has actually happened in Delhi, where people are buying power at 4 rupees and selling it at 7 or 8 rupees, or even if the renewable energy generator has to make a loss at 50 paisa or 1 rupee in the afternoon, he'll probably make it up in the evening by additional 4 rupees. So I've done this exercise. So most important part of this exercise is that if your capex is going to be significantly higher, which cannot absorb the cost, and your power generation cost is going to be 10, 12, 14 rupees per unit, with V2G, with some support from the government in terms of batteries subsidy, the actual capex can actually go down by 60%, depending on the use actually and how you actually put the entire technology to use. So whether I have done the modeling for V2G, so similar probably can be done for battery swapping also, because battery swapping is also a recent phenomenon. So people are just trying to get into. The advantage with V2G larger buses side is that in one shot you have a battery which is 300 kilowatt hour. Battery swapping side, the size of batteries is 2, 3, 4, 5 kilowatt hour. So aggregating them and putting them together is something which is difficult, but and that could be a scenario where even corporates can invest, and if they're getting subsidy for buses, it makes a significantly viable model, because as far as private buses is concerned, there is no FAME 3, FAME 2 or FAME 3 subsidy. That is, we are pushing for FAME 3 to be given for private corporate buses, but at this point of time it is missing. That's a very important point, and cost coming down is very important for the entire ecosystem to get developed and more people coming to use the technology.
I have a question for Jayant as well as Mahesh. Basically, on the focus, of course, of the discussion has been, my name is Srinivas, I build solar-powered cold storages. One of the use case, I mean, we've been talking about mobile batteries going around a bus becoming an energy trader or something. But when we build solar cold storages with a battery backup, thermal and electric, and the grid as the ultimate backup, there's quite a bit of, let's say, surplus energy available. A cooling load, as we know, is a constant load. It is not moving around. The fridge is always on. The cold storage is always on. So there is a steady state load that is there, predictable load that is there. So you can offset some of the grid usage by diverting it to charge the thermal battery. And in the last mile, 8,000 feet above mean sea level, if you can put that surplus energy back into the grid, there's going to be some resilience into the system, the grid. I don't know the dynamics, but I'm sure it will affect the grid resilience part as well, right? The SAIDI, SEFI parameters or whatever. So there is no study. I mean, we do build these distributed assets across India, and there's a lot of, now every farmer cannot become a trader for sure, the energy trader, but he can definitely contribute to the last mile grid resilience if we have a business model. We have a business model, I'll talk to you at some point, but that's mine. And to Mahesh, on the technology side, I mean, we're trying to get to a stage where we're trying to see what is the mix of the battery, the chemical battery versus the thermal storage. What is the ratio that we should put? for a given solar insolation. So that's something that probably I'll bounce off some ideas from you. Oh, thank you.
Yes, you want to go first? Sure. So we have funded thermal storage, like cooling applications itself. And the maths works based on what is the cost of the cycle when you put an energy back into the grid. If you're looking at things with low cycle efficiency, like mechanical systems, like refrigeration systems, there is a significant loss of value which happens when you're charging a discharge. When you're looking at battery, there is a low loss of value, but in the battery case, you're consuming a cycle. So if the battery cost is X and you have 3,000 cycles in static, then you're consuming one cycle every time you do it. So you have to pay. Today, time of day offers you no more than 2 rupees in most situations, if at all. So why do I use up my battery cycle or my cycle efficiency of 30%, loss of 30% to pump it back for 2 rupees?
Exactly.
Time of use, practically, if you look at what grid is buying at and what grid is selling at, time of use could be practically set at a level which is, let's say, in night time you're getting power at ACOS into 0.66 or ACOS into 0.5, right? And in in evening peak time you're selling it at ACOS times 2 or ACOS times 3. At that marginal level, people will start coming in. Now, each individual farmer, each individual household, each individual two-wheeler owner are not the people who are going to create the solution. There will be aggregators or aggregation models which will create the solution. We are talking about some of these solutions on the grid side, right, for grid resilience. Today, we have a missing economic incentive for somebody to shift demand to evening, off evening. Today, we have a missing economic incentive for any electrical vehicle owner in India to shift their demand away from the evening peak. That economic incentive is missing. Now, we are moving from there. So when we are talking about the intersection of stationary and mobility, that's assuming these policy things get sorted. Because then only, I will say, okay, in 8,000 feet altitude, I'm even ready to start a diesel generator and pump power back into the grid at 30 rupees. Because the cost of grid going down versus power coming in at 30 makes sense. Or if I take it from a cold chain, I'd pay 15 rupees to them instead of 4 rupees plus 1 rupee or 2 rupees.
And since Priya, you have some experience with investing in kind of these grid solutions that are providing intelligence, just want to check in case you have some specific ones, then we'll go to English.
I actually don't have any further comments to add post what Jen said, so I think you go to.
So basically, you're a cold storage, right?
Yeah.
So let me give a different perspective of the cold storage. There is actually a water-based flow around the building. You can go to IIT Hyderabad, look at the system, the best cooling system. You will maintain the same cooling throughout the year. So you're just going to pump and recirculate the gravity base and everything. And there is issues of the corrosion. Corrosion technology is really good. And but the problem is there is no the education for the cold storage is not happening because the heat loss and heat generation, right? Everything is surrounded by energy loss and energy gain, right? So we need to understand what is the most efficient cold storage technology, right? So one is the pump based, which can flow the cold water like this. It can pump down by the gravity and pump up through a motor. So apart from you can use a very less solar, but your efficiencies will be increased a lot. Then that is one thing. But coming to the tariff rates, using the cold storage back, giving it back to that one, I don't have that expertise. But the solution wise, there is a better solutions that are available. If you have opportunity to visit IIT Hyderabad, they have this already implemented in their own buildings. It's the most efficient. They are making a lot of savings in their cost.
So just want to take the next question quickly to Dave. So Dave, as you were looking at setting up a gigafactory as well and having a presence on saying India as a manufacturing hub, would love to get some of your thoughts on how you're looking at that as an opportunity of saying how the Indian manufacturing opportunity in this space specifically?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, Shiva, I think our thesis is mostly that investments definitely will flow into the upstream side of the ecosystem when we talk about mobility, which would mean of late a lot of investments have already happened on the auto OEM side of things. Now going forward, it's all about powertrain and batteries and storage. Government of course is doing its bit, and I think in general it would be a slow process. When we look at, from a startup ecosystem perspective, going from R&D to lab scale to pilot scale to a gigafactory scale, it's a process which can't be avoided in general. It's going to be a slow process. From our perspective, I think manufacturing definitely makes sense. We are looking at India as one of the promising markets, as Chandra initially highlighted, 100 gigawatt hours plus of demand only coming from trucks and other markets as well. So we definitely look at India from that perspective of not only bringing our cell manufacturing technology but also bringing in our cathode technology to India to localize the entire ecosystem. And I think it's going to be a phase-wise approach. Right now, from an India perspective, we of course have battery pack assembly already happening. Next few years should be all about cell manufacturing. Once that ramping up happens, there is a potential demand for cathode makers to come to India, which is right now not the case. But possibly once we have cell manufacturers who attain a certain scale and are able to write checks for 20 gigawatt hours worth of cathode demand, that's when it makes a viable case for cathode makers to come to India, and that's when it will make a case for us to localize our cathodes in India within our gigafactory going forward. And of course, all of this parallelly will have a recycling infra which will have to be developed going forward. But from a C4B perspective, definitely very, very keen to build a gigafactory. We are looking at operating partners, and next step would be of course cathode and recycling, and we will bring a complete suite of technology package to India once we are in the country, which is at least a few months away.
Sandeep, I think you had a comment on the last question, so I don't know.
I did. I was going to ask a question on V2X, bidirectional energy potential in India. We had a company that came in from the US and talked about the fact that we're still a few years away from actually getting a car that actually can engage in bidirectional energy exchange. But that will actually cause adoption to happen very quickly when people know that if they have to pay upfront to pivot from an ICE-powered car to one that's electrically powered, where they can actually supply energy back into the grid to make money, thereby actually making the grid itself a lot more efficient. And the upgradation costs of the grid are not really required because the pressure on the grid reduces substantially. People are actually putting back power on the grid. And that was recommended as a solution for India as well, because we haven't upgraded our grid in the longest time. So one question that I had for the group was, where do you see the potential for bidirectional energy is one. And secondly, I've also heard that open source software is actually what's going to drive wide-scale adoption of bidirectional energy, for the simple reason that if you tell people in India that you need to get onto a you need to actually subscribe to an app on which you have to pay subscription costs to get money back, people are less likely to do it. But if you actually make the government actually comes up with a policy that makes the source an open source, where people actually get back a percentage of their saving, have to pay a percentage of their savings without actually having to put up money up front to get those savings, then there'll be a much, much faster adoption. So, those two questions, if anyone has a comment on those.
Just a quick one from my side, and I think we can take this to the last question, because I hear some beeping, which I'm assuming was our time for the panel as well. But I think the net metering was... Okay, so Mahesh, let's just quickly go, since you had a comment, and then we'll just open the floor. And wherever that vibration is from, just it's not on phone.
Very quickly, Sandeep, just to respond, and I think was the response to the other question. For our, what we've seen, especially in discounts, both private discounts and public discounts, there is actually an interest to look at these B2G solutions, where there's actually a payment and a subscription model between the discounts and the B2G players. where essentially they have a per kilowatt sort of repeat cost attached to information analytics that can come from these V2G players. And I think that Tata Power, BSS Yamuna, BSS Rajdhani, these are sort of some of the discounts we've seen that have actually taken some steps to pilot these innovations, and where essentially V2G can play a much larger role in certain locations. So that's what I wanted to say.
So let's talk about V2G. So why we buy electric vehicle? Because I need range, right? You are giving it back to the grid, but V2G will come on the emergency set, like when the power is off, right? So in India the power interruption is very quite common. That's where the V2G will work really well in India. But okay, let's take the.
It could be also because people want to make money, right?
Yeah.
Not
So,
just only because power.
no, but what is the source of their energy kicking? Yeah, that's a big problem. Right? Again, you need to get charged. Where are you going to go and get charged?
I think the net metering was also an experiment that got delayed really badly in India, just how much they started capping you out on what they started netting on that. Sorry, we had one more from the audience, I think, or two more from the audience. I just want to quickly get those before. So I'll try to limit it to one answer from the panel, but like this time.
So, am I audible?
Yes.
Green one, I think. That's not good.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well.
So the question is about the battery swapping. Now, I had an idea that it needs to be a controlled network where pilferage is difficult. Otherwise, how do you know if it is open source like the current petrol pump system? How do you know that somebody is not replacing a battery with a fake one? So it needs to be within a controlled system where otherwise there's pilferage. Is that correct, or is there a way around it?
I'll give you one example. To start at the best battery swapping is Tesla. When the Tesla launched the first battery swapping, they compared with an Audi when they're filling the gasoline from Costco. The swapping happened in 2 minutes, the filling happened in 3 minutes in Audi car. But Tesla did not try for swapping. They know the problem. And because when you own a car, it belongs to me. The critical asset in the vehicle is a battery. So it's my perspective. I'm not biased to that, but my point of view is in the chaos market of India, battery swapping is not going to work out. Okay.
So Sandeep is invested in
I was just going to.
No. He invested. I agree.
No, but I actually, can I just make a point on that?
So my point is about pilferage.
No, I'm saying that disruption cannot happen without adoption. And adoption can only happen when you have an efficient solution for the problem. Effectively building charging infrastructure is a long gestation situation. It costs a lot of money. And so battery swapping becomes the only viable solution how do you actually build charging stations in a city like Delhi or Bombay and cause adoption and pivot to electrical vehicles? It's a chicken and egg problem. People will not buy electrical vehicles until they know that there is a charging infrastructure, but you won't create charging infrastructure until you have electrical vehicles. Swapping solves that problem, and we've invested in a company called Battery Smart,
Yes.
which has now become the single largest interoperability battery swapping network in this country. Ever since they created the battery swapping network, you've actually seen a massive increase in the number of pivots from three-wheeler ICE-powered to electrical.
But I think they're spending 2x of batteries.
So
Right.
I just want to make sure we're also covering the other questions.
But just to mark off, I think that's where there is a challenge for a model to actually be built up. Is there a specific subset question, or I just want to make the
Question is, where is pilferage? That's not the answer. Is pilferage an issue?
so Sandeep, in your experience, has pilferage been one of the issues with the
Pilferage becomes an issue if you actually have only one type of battery type. If you're agnostic to the solution of batteries, and by the way, pilferage has not been an issue at all. There hasn't been an issue with pilferage.
And he's invested in the most scaled player in this space.
By far. We haven't seen any pilferage at all.
Yeah.
Couple of questions. One is that about penetration itself, right?
Thank you. We know India has got these ambitious targets to get to EV penetration up by 30% by 2030, if I'm not wrong, right? And even more higher in terms of two-wheelers. That's what we're looking at. But question is like everybody's discussing, where's the charging infrastructure, or how's the scale going to happen, right? What do you see is the one single most important thing in making this happen, or at least getting us closer to that? Where we are today, I think the penetration is pretty low. If any of the panelists can answer that, what is that one single factor you think? One sub question to that, I think the idea came from what Mr. Chandrasekhar was saying, is about demand aggregation. We've seen this happen with LEDs in India, right? When government decided ESL started doing huge amount of tenders aggregating demand across India, the LED prices dropped significantly. India started looking at actively manufacturing LEDs, and then we started seeing now at $40 bulb, right? So, is that something, a solution that the government can look at, and is it a viable solution?
You mean, are you saying that if the cost of batteries goes down, adoption is going to increase?
Yeah, one of the questions.
As long as India remains dependent on for lithium externally, I don't see how that's going to change anytime soon. We have to come up with an alternative chemistry for prices of batteries to come down. But what is actually causing the massive adoption right now and the pivot to electrical vehicles is the two-wheeler and three-wheeler segment, where the TCO analysis actually points out to the fact that if you can actually retrofit and not buy a new vehicle, the savings of that you actually generate vis-a-vis the retrofit in terms of the savings per kilometer of operation actually gives you back, the payback period for that then becomes very, very justifiable, because you are doubling the life of your asset, you're getting your money back without actually having to spend a lot of money upfront for the cost of the vehicle. Why four-wheeler adoption in India is actually a little questionable unless it's a commercial application, commercial fleet application, is that if you're actually just going to drive your vehicle from the office to home and back, the upfront cost of basically buying an electrical vehicle is 65% actually. 60%. It doesn't make economic sense for you to do that, because the savings that you generate over per kilometer operation of the electrical vehicle, the payback period gets extended so far into the future that it's just not worth it.
Yeah, so we're talking about a TCO moment here that will compare to the CNG vehicle that you have as a four-wheeler.
So the revolution is being driven by two-wheelers and three-wheelers, not by four-wheelers.
I just want to add.
Very quickly, I'm going to give it because there's one more phone.
Yeah.
See, how many people drive electrically a four-wheeler? Nobody. Okay. So the moment you buy electrical vehicle, you are not getting into an asset of depreciation, and also because if you use ICE, you're spending up 10,000 per month. If you use electric, you're spending 1,000. So your EMI is a little bit covered in your electric four-wheeler. So please do the math correctly, because four-wheelers, if you have fixed range, it will give a lot of buyback. Because I know a person who brought the second vehicle delivered by MG, still he is using. He got his return on investment in just 4 or 5 years. 4 years is entire 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs which is spending what he got.
He must be driving a lot. That must be driving his car a lot then.
Yeah, because you need to pick up the kids, you need to go to the office, and you need to get the groceries. And this is a part of the life.
So the question still remains, and I still do not understand.
so
what's going to drive adoption? What's going to increase?
Cost.
Cost.
Just a cost.
So I've also just flagged by the team that we are running over from the panel and they do want us to wrap up now. So I'm just going to request the panelists who can stay on if they can to take the last few questions offline. But thank you all for taking on the time. Thank you as an audience for being so interactive. Appreciate the IC team for helping coordinate everything with the setup as well.